This video tutorial is part of a series to better understand the petitioning process for the Community Assistance, Recovery, and Empowerment, or CARE Act. This video tutorial provides information about the requirements outlined in the CARE-100 form to submit additional documentation, either through a CARE-101 form or additional documentation. In other video tutorials, we focus on an overview of the petition process and how to complete the CARE-100 form. The CARE-100 form is the petition to commence CARE Act proceedings. This video tutorial focuses on another required element, at least one of two options. Option 1 is a CARE-101 form, which is a declaration of a licensed behavioral health professional stating that they have examined the respondent in the past 60 days or has made multiple attempts to examine them and believes the respondent meets diagnostic criteria for care. Option 2 is declaration, evidence, or other documentation of at least 2 intensive treatments, one within the previous 60 days. Keep in mind that this evidence itself is an eligibility requirement, but it's supporting evidence to help a judge meet the prima facie determination that the individual may be eligible for care. So, for example, if you are not a licensed behavioral health professional, such as a police officer or family member, this option may be a more appropriate option for you. If you're a licensed behavioral health professional, you could complete either option 1, the CARE-101 form, or complete this declaration, evidence, or other documentation. We will now share some guidance for completing these options. First, we will go over the CARE-101 form, and then we will share some guidance for the declaration, evidence, or other documentation. Let's take a look at the CARE-101 form. This form will be used to help the court determine whether the respondent meets the diagnostic criteria for CARE Act proceedings. Remember that the CARE-100 form gives the petitioner the option to include information about eligibility in that form or separately in the CARE-101 mental health declaration form. If the information is included in this form, it doesn't need to be duplicated in the CARE-100 form as well. Notice at the top of the form, it says CARE-101. There are 4 pages in this form, and the file is a fillable PDF. It can also be printed out and written on. It asks you to complete some biographical information and then asks you to provide information that will help a judge determine eligibility. Things you would include are a diagnosis of schizophrenia spectrum or other psychotic disorders, observed behaviors and symptoms, declining mental and physical state, and inability to meet basic needs for food, shelter, or clothing, difficulty maintaining a residence, using transportation, or managing money, difficulty functioning socially, or creating and maintaining relationships, or repeated and ongoing refusal to engage in treatment, or they accept treatment, but it's either interrupted or ineffective at stabilizing symptoms. The top of the form is called a caption. This information should match the caption submitted on the CARE-100 form. If you are working with another petitioner in support of their petition, work with that petitioner to make sure you are including the right information, or request that they fill out this portion of the form. In the first box is the petitioner's name, address, and contact information. The second box should have the information of the court it's being filed in. The third box should have the name of the respondent, i.e. the person you want to connect with services. The area on the right, including the case number, is for the court use only. In items 1 and 2, you will fill out your information, including your name, office address, telephone number, and email address. In item 3, you will select the option that best describes your license status. You should complete either option A or option B. You should check item 3A if you are a licensed behavioral health professional and conducting the examinations within the scope of your license. You should then select one of 5 options: a physician, psychologist, clinical social worker, marriage and family therapist, or a professional clinical counselor. Let's take a look at item 3B, which is where you indicate if you've been granted a license waiver in California. If this item is applicable to you, you will need to check this item and then check one of 4 options listed, with the 4th option on the next page of the form. Either option 1, option 2, option 3, or the 4th option on the next page of the form. Option 4 under item 3B is the last option. If you select this option, you must indicate whether you are employed or under contract as one of the professionals listed here. In item 4, write the name of the respondent and indicate whether that person is or is not a patient under your continuing care and treatment. Next, you will indicate if you have examined the individual or if you have made multiple attempts, both within 60 days of filing the petition. Item 5A asks you to indicate if you have examined the respondent and include the date. If this is the case, you can skip item 6 altogether. Click item 5B if you have attempted to examine the respondent but were unsuccessful due to the respondent's lack of cooperation and include the dates. If you selected that you attempted to examine but were ultimately unsuccessful, you will need to include additional information in item 6, which asks you to explain in detail when, how many attempts, and the type of attempts that you made. Also include how the respondent reacted to those attempts and the outcome. Item 7 asks you to provide information related to the diagnostic criteria for CARE Act proceedings, noting that each of the items must be met to qualify. Note that many of these items are also included in the CARE-100 form, but it can be indicated in that form that this information is provided here on the CARE-101 form instead. As you speak to each criteria, consider behaviors and symptoms that substantially interfere with the respondent's ability to perform essential and routine tasks needed for work or self-care. This may include delusions, hallucinations, or unusual and ongoing mood changes. Include evidence or observations related to the disorder. For example, difficulty with self-care, like bathing, grooming, dressing appropriately for the weather, securing healthcare, or following medical advice. Difficulty maintaining a residence, using transportation, or managing money day to day. Difficulty concentrating or completing tasks as scheduled. Difficulty functioning socially or maintaining relationships, or repeated and ongoing refusal to accept treatment, or they accept treatment, but it's either interrupted or ineffective at stabilizing their symptoms. Throughout these questions about eligibility, speak to those impacts of the respondent's serious mental disorder that you observe. In item 7A, you should indicate the specific diagnosis, keeping in mind that eligible diagnoses are schizophrenia spectrum disorder or other psychotic disorders in the same class. A person who does not have a diagnosis in this class is not eligible, even if they have a serious mental disorder or illness such as bipolar disorder or major depression. The psychotic disorder must not be based on a medical condition, including a physical health condition such as a traumatic brain injury, autism, dementia, or a neurological condition. A person with a current diagnosis of substance use disorder must also have a psychotic disorder and meet all other criteria in item 7 to be eligible. A diagnosis alone is not enough, and the next few questions will ask you to include information related to other eligibility criteria. In section 7B, you should include information related to the symptoms being severe in degree and persistent in duration. This page of the CARE-101 form continues to ask you, as a behavioral health professional, to speak to eligibility requirements. Here you should explain how their serious mental disorder is causing behavior that substantially interferes with primary activities of daily living. For example, are they not able to secure shelter, housing, and regular access to food and water? Are they out in the extreme heat or cold without the right clothing or resources? Are elements of their psychosis, for example, delusions or hallucinations, causing them to act out aggressively or also causing others to react aggressively to them? You should also explain how their serious mental disorder may result in an inability to maintain stable adjustment and independent functioning without treatment, support, and rehabilitation for a long or indefinite period of time. Here, you should include details speaking to the respondent not being clinically stabilized and ongoing voluntary treatment. Describe why you believe the respondent is not being adequately supported in a voluntary treatment program, such that their condition and symptoms are not stabilized in their current treatment program. For item 7D, you must include one of the options and include details. Number 1, the respondent is unlikely to survive safely in the community without supervision, and their condition is substantially deteriorating. For example, you can include recent instances where the respondent has needed supervision to survive in the community due to a lack of reality orientation, confusion, or impaired insight, or how the respondent's ability to think clearly, communicate, or participate in regular activities has rapidly declined, or include frequent arrests or hospitalizations due to symptoms. 2 is the respondent needs services and supports to prevent a relapse or deterioration that would likely result in grave disability or serious harm to the respondent or others. Describe how the respondent would be gravely disabled or would cause serious harm to others or themselves unless they receive services and supports. Grave disability includes a person's inability due to a mental disorder to provide for their basic personal needs for food, clothing, or shelter. Serious harm includes injury causing extreme pain, high risk of death, or a loss of physical or mental functions. This could include self-injuring behavior, such as walking into traffic or putting them in extreme risk. On this last page of the CARE-101 form, you will include details about the remaining eligibility requirements. And 7E should explain if participating in the CARE process is the least restrictive alternative for the respondent. Include if there are alternatives and why they wouldn't be less restrictive, such as voluntary participation in other out-treatment patient services. And in 7F, you should explain how the respondent could benefit from participation in the CARE process. You could cite how they responded positively to treatment in the past, or state your medical opinion that they would benefit from treatment. Do they need access to supportive housing? Do they need regular appointments with a psychiatrist or other healthcare provider? Do they need infrastructure to provide supportive medication decisions? Have they stabilized while receiving structured support and treatment in the past? You don't have to be an expert in the CARE process. Speak to how you believe this individual will benefit and include specific information as appropriate. In item 8, you can include any additional information regarding your examination that could help the court determine eligibility for CARE proceedings. Either include that information on the form itself or indicate if you would like to include an attachment, which should be labeled as Attachment 8. You are then asked to sign and date the CARE-101 form. We just went through the requirements of the CARE-101 form, or the Mental Health Declaration. The other option to support the petition is declaration, evidence, or other documentation that the respondent was detained for at least two periods of intensive treatment, the most recent within the past 60 days. What are examples of evidence? A copy of the certification of intensive treatment, a declaration from a witness to the intensive treatment, hospital discharge paperwork, or a family member's affidavit recording knowledge of hospitalizations are all examples of what could qualify. The judge has broad discretions when reviewing the petition. The goal is to provide sufficient information in the petition, including in this declaration, evidence, or other documentation, for the court to determine that the individual meets or may meet the eligibility standard. Having evidence of an intensive treatment is one of the possible requirements for the petition, but remember, it is not an eligibility requirement for someone to participate in CARE, meaning they still may be eligible for CARE even if they have not had a recent intensive treatment. On the CARE Act Resource Center, we have collected materials specific to petitioners, including information about petitions and general information about CARE and the CARE process. Scan this QR code or go to careact.org to search through our resource library.